Okay. Okay. It's 7:01 p.m. June 16th, 2022. I call this meeting of the Wellfleet Select Board to order in accordance with the temporary suspension and enhancement of the open meeting law as allowed by the General Court of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The first item on our agenda is open session public comments and announcements. Public comments must be brief and the board will not deliberate or vote on any matter raised solely during announcements and public comments. Yeah, Helen, so this is, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get to say it.
Yeah.
This is my last meeting this go round, and I want to thank you all and tell whoever's listening, which is probably nobody because they know we're going to disappear in a minute, how grateful I am to have been able to work for the town for 23 years. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen.
Okay.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Helen.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me be here.
Correspondence report. Mr. Waldo, why don't you bring up some of the concerns surrounding it?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did actually request this to be on the agenda, and I appreciate the chairman putting it on. What I'm looking for here is to see if the board would consider removing the correspondence item that appears on pretty much your regularly scheduled agendas for public meetings, or at very least maybe modify the content. I have concern with what's being presented to the public. I worry for exposure to liability. I worry about privacy concerns, not only for the public, but on the staff. With that potential being of an unintentional disclosure of sensitive information. If you recall, you look at the correspondence report, it's pretty brief. It's really simple. You put the subject line of what an email was, and you can see the first line of correspondence. Sometimes you can see who it's coming from and who it's not. And I don't know the history behind it. I think it's really to show transparency, which I get it and I understand it. I just have concerns that even within a subject line or even the first sentence, that sensitive information may actually unintentionally get out. And we had one such issue recently that involved one of our own staff members, that it got a little too close to privacy information stating where they lived, where they moved from. And that was a concern to me, and not only that, but a concern that we may do it again and it might be a little more serious next time. Overall, the government, the state, we have a process for this, for people to get correspondence. The Freedom of Information Act allows people to request email exchange, request dialogue discussion between the board as well as individuals. And when we have that opportunity, when it goes through that process, we have the opportunity to review it, redact it, send it to legal counsel if we need to, have it further redacted, and then present them with that information. And, I know that the chairman does a great job on trying to filter through what's on there and what might be presented, but I just have concerns that we might actually, make something public that shouldn't be public. When I talk about maybe modifying the correspondence, I was thinking maybe we could leave it as an agenda item, but include letters to the board. Thank you for the parade permit. Thank you for the work you've done here, or I have concerns, but maybe leave that email section out. So I just wanted to bring it up for discussion and see what the board thought with that, and just as we move forward. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I just have concerns about people knowing that the subject of their email is going to be printed in the packet and abusing that to get whatever they want said out into the packet. out to the public in a way that I don't think is appropriate all the time. So I think probably if we were going to do something, maybe we could amend it to just, instead of having an email, but just say, correspondence from and date received, and leave out that subject line or whatever that may be. And then if it needs to be discussed by the board or something, we always still have that correspondence report on the agenda, but not to allow people to just abuse the subject line of an email without the context behind it.
Okay, Helen,
I'd love to hear from Barbara first, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
Barbara,
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Helen. Yeah, I share Mr. Waldo's concerns and then some. So I think there is just tremendous vulnerability there in having it in its current form, and would be happy to see it, ratcheted back as much as possible and as much as my colleagues would agree to. Thank you.
okay.
I feel a bit differently. Ryan, you're the first chair that's ever had to do the correspondence, and I look forward to the day when you guys have staff, a member of the staff, as it used to be, receiving, stamping, and then recording correspondence. It is essential that you keep the list of everything that's received. But I agree with Mike, the full content of whatever is sent to us doesn't have to be available online, but we do for our own purposes and for the public's purposes, because these are public documents. They're it's a public records thing. If something gets sent to the select board, anybody can see it, unless there are certain narrow things that make it personally, as Rich, you said, somebody's address or something like that. But the public should know everything we get. And if you just had who it's from and the date and who it's to, because it could just be one of us, which is a different matter. But for our own purposes, and having been through so many town administrators, for the purposes of staff, of the administration, you have to sometimes rummage around desperately trying to find a piece of correspondence that relates to something that's come up. So I agree about the privacy, but we absolutely have to have an accurate list for every single thing we get. Thank you.
Okay, so, I like having, a record for the public of correspondence, just because it provide, especially if it's around certain issues where we're getting a lot of letters about a specific issue. A recent one is LeCount Hollow. But I don't think there's a way to overcome the need to review everything and make sure that yeah. So I'm in favor of removing it at this time.
May I ask for clarification of it?
The correspondence report.
The list, right? Or the agenda item?
The list, and maybe the agenda item. I don't know. I do know that Eastham does have a correspondence report, but it's much more scaled back. But that's produced by staff. So, Barbara,
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I forgot to mention that just in all the work I've done in different towns, I've never seen anything like this, an email snippet list, that's pushed out to the public, everything that the board has received. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
okay, Mike.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of removing it. Generally, there's been meetings where stuff has come up in the correspondence report that I think was inappropriately brought up in the meeting. that put the town in potential liability for litigious action. So, you know, just because somebody writes us something doesn't mean it's really really fit for broadcast, just because it's been said to us. And that kind of stuff needs to be reviewed and brought forward, really. So I would prefer to not have it on the agenda, but, you know, obviously a compilation of public records has to exist. And usually we would have, like if there's a public records request, you submit all public records and then it's compiled at that time. As far as emails go, I think we've had several public records requests, and then, you know, we comply with that by compiling the emails, and the ones that are sent to Board of Selectmen are easily gathered between a certain date. There can be a search on those and then submitted. So I don't necessarily see the point of it. There's been things where there's, you know, been like feuds between neighbors where somebody writes to the select board and then something gets said on the select board meeting that I find inappropriate by a select board member. No one that is on this board right now, but I've definitely felt that things have gone, you know, beyond lines that should be crossed in a select board meeting that put the town in a place where it could be held liable.
Helen?
Yeah, transparency equals accountability. I think we should, rather you should keep the correspondence agenda item on, because how often have we gotten something that is right tied into future concerns? And it needs to be referred to, and one hopes that everybody on the board has read it because it's come into us. And I think it's very important to bend over backwards to do the public's business in public. And hiding things that come into us.
Nobody's hiding it,
Helen. Excuse me, if you don't have it plainly listed for people to see, even if I do agree the content of the letter shouldn't be there or the email shouldn't be there, because sometimes it's a letter and that has to be in there too, you know, on paper. I think we should be as open as possible about it. I'm very anti, you know, hiding things. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you.
Yep.
It's not hiding things, Helen. Like, just because somebody writes a nasty email to the select board or about a particular staff member doesn't mean that they should be put on the agenda or that should be brought forward. It's not hiding anything to leave those out of our agenda and packet. And if we're talking about a future concern, you can very easily say we've received several letters about this subject, and I think it's a topic for future concern. I mean, you don't have to not speak about the fact that you received correspondence about it when you're bringing up future concerns. So I still don't see the point.
We're misunderstanding each other. I think the list that exists that Ryan's been doing, and it would be nice if staff would do that, with the date, who it was addressed to, because sometimes it's addressed to department heads and stuff too, and who it's from, period. That's all you need. But it shouldn't ever be hidden that we have gotten that from that person on that date. You don't have to divulge the subject matter. Thank you.
You know, Mr. Chair, if I could just add, you know, and I know we're all on the same page here, that, you know, this information will always be readily available to anyone that wishes to see it. You know, they just have to go through the process of seeing it, which is a guided process that the Attorney General gives us, or gives the public, to be able to see these records. And, you know, if they want the information, they can request it from the town clerk. We'll compile it. We'll go through the legal avenue to have them redacted if it needs to be. I mean, we can go through them and, you know, basically just minimize the risk. If the board's so comfortable and agrees with Helen, we're happy to at least minimize the content as well. You know, any adjustment at this point, I'd really just like to get that subject line, that first line of discussion, where I think we're most vulnerable to disclosing sensitive information, get that out of there. And, you know, I think at a very minimum, that's what we'd like to see.
Um,
I'm agreeing, as you can see. Yeah, keep the list because people have to know that it exists in order to ask for it, and leave everything else out except addressee, you know, who it's from, who it's to, and the date. Thank you.
How do you raise, oh, there we are.
yeah, John,
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree that, you know, these releases, they need to be available, but they should be vetted. And I'm comfortable with doing that through the town clerk. I don't see where that would be a big hardship. I'm comfortable either way, as long as there is a vetting process. It just seems that it would be more certain to take place if there was that step with the town clerk releasing the information to anyone who requested it. It would have an extra set of eyes on it instead of possibly being inadvertently released with personal information.
okay. Mike,
Just quickly, might it make sense to just eliminate this, and then when we have particular subjects on our agenda item, that we could include correspondence related to those agenda items that have been kind of vetted.
yeah, it's hard to do that because a lot of them come in after the meeting's been posted.
Sure, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean, right now, I think that being able to mention the fact that we received letters, they don't have to be specific in an agenda item. And then if people want to request those letters, then they could. You know, you still can mention the fact that we've received letters, say who they're from and whatever on a particular subject. But I'm kind of opposed to having, you know, people just spew whatever they want and have it posted in our agenda packet.
Okay, Barbara,
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I don't think there's a reason to even have the list pushed out in our agenda as part of the packet. And if there is something a subject that is worth the board addressing at a future meeting, then that can be addressed. So I would favor not having any display or listing of the correspondence at all. Thank you.
okay, John, do you have your hand still up?
No, how do I take it down?
I can do it for you. Hang on.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so,
No, I just did it.
so I'd like a motion, just so that it's clear.
I move to remove the correspondence report from the agenda along with the correspondence list.
Second,
Okay, roll
And
call
packet,
vote,
sorry, the agenda and packet.
roll call
John,
vote,
I. John, I.
Barbara, I.
Michael, I.
Ryan, I.
Ellen, nay.
Okay, motion carries 4-1.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that, I move to adjourn open session, not to go back into open session per MGL chapter 30A, section 21, purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. The open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. For personnel, and purpose 2, to conduct strategies sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Is there
Second,
a second? Okay, can I have a roll call vote, please?
John, I.
Barbara, I.
Michael, I.
Brian, I.
Ellen, I.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Can you lock the room, Rebecca?